We are now ready to track our object in LoliTrack 5. The task here is to identify our object, select the appropriate tracking method, and then run the tracking. The first step is to find a frame where you want to start the tracking from. If you're tracking multiple objects, the first frame should be one where all the objects are clearly distinguished from each other. In our case, the very first frame is a fine starting point. We will then choose a suitable tracking method up here. In our arena, which is defined as the non-masked area in the video, we have a single object and there is no risk that our object can blend with or hide behind other objects, what we call occlusions. We will select this single object tracking method. If we have had multiple objects in the arena, and where there is a risk of occlusions, we would choose the tracking method in the middle. The last method on the right is if we have multiple arenas with a single object in each, like in a well plate. Next, we select if we want to create and track a midline on our object. The midline is a line drawn along the center of the object, such as a vertebrate, from head to tail, and you can have a number of tracking points along that line. Midline tracking is needed if you want to track other markers than the center of gravity of all the object pixels, like the front or the back of the object, which we will look closer at when analyzing our video. Tracking the midline will impact tracking performance, so if you do not need such data, choose none to speed up the tracking. We will leave it at simple, since a fine midline is only really needed if you want the highest data resolution for the midline points. To identify one or more objects, left-click on the yellow pixels on the video preview. You can also let LoliTrack identify them for you by clicking the Auto-Select All Objects. The number of found objects is shown here, and each object will be listed up here, where you can change the color and their name. If you do not want to include an object in the tracking, uncheck this checkbox. And if you want to delete the object, you can do it here. Note that if we go to the next frame on the timeline using the arrow keys on our keyboard or by dragging the cursor using our mouse, the object identity disappears and we cannot start tracking. This is an important point illustrating that when we identify objects, it is initially only for a single frame, namely the frame we want to start tracking from. So, if you find that you have objects listed here, but you cannot see their identity in the video preview, you must find the frame where you originally identified the objects. Alternatively, reset the tracking data here and start over. Finding the initial frame also applies when we are to track a specific time interval in the video. If you hold down Shift and then click and drag on the video timeline, you can select the interval, shown in purple, that you want to track. Now place the cursor on any frame inside the interval and identify the object. If you place the cursor in the middle of the interval, LoliTrack will track from the cursor and forward first, and then track backwards, but only inside the selected interval. Click Start Tracking to track the object. When tracking is complete, the timeline will be highlighted in green, indicating that you have tracking data in this interval, and you can drag the cursor to preview the tracking. But you may also have intervals on the timeline that are highlighted in red. These are intervals where LoliTrack estimates that there's a risk of identity loss or identity switches between two objects. So use the red intervals to check if any tracking errors are occurring. If you have a situation where two objects switch identities in a tracked interval, you can quickly correct for this error. Find the frame where the switch occurs, left-click on the first of the two objects, and then right-click on the second one to switch their identities. Drag the timeline cursor to check if they maintain their correct identities and repeat this process if they do not. Tracking objects is a performance-heavy task, and if your computer is not powerful enough, the tracking may take a very long time or the application may even crash. To reduce the use of PC resources and the tracking time, you can try to lower the image resolution when you load the video, or use the time-lapse feature so that you have fewer frames to track. You should also select the correct tracking method, and you can decide not to track the midline or to track fewer objects at a time. Finally, you can choose to track just an interval of the video, which also limits the number of frames you are to track. And that's it on how to track objects in LoliTrack 5. We are now ready for the final step in 2D tracking. So whenever you're happy with the object tracking here, hit the arrow button to enter the Analysis tab. If you have any questions about tracking objects in LoliTrack 5 or about other aspects of the software, you're welcome to contact us on our website.